Hello, hello, and welcome to week 6, day 26 of the fall 2025 Web Development Technologies course. I'm Jim Coppin with Rankin Technical College. So, congratulations. We made it to the final chapter of the Response Web Design book. It's a huge accomplishment to get through this book, and you should be proud of how far you've come. So, just wanted to let you know that I'm proud of you, and I know it's hard work, and I really appreciate all your hard work in this course. So kudos to you. So first, let's see, housekeeping and review. So as far as assignments are concerned, I guess really here, you ready for something different? So we're actually finished with the U-turn, the strike a chord, and the wildlife rescue. So for our chapter 12, we won't be doing any of that. We're skipping over chapter 11, which is kind of about deployment, and I'm going to kind of show you how we're going to do a deployment. From their book, it's more or less about using a file transfer to transfer your file somewhere, but we're going to be using what's called GitHub Pages for that, and I'll show you that. Not today, but probably either later part of this week or next week. So we'll kind of go over how you can make some of your things available via a URL, right? So you can just share a URL to access different pages you've made. The one big thing I did want to mention is, so like I said, U-turn, strike a chord, and wildlife rescue, we're pretty much done with that. Chapter 12, you still will need to do the apply, analyze, extend, and then the written test. But after that, that will be it for that book. The one thing that's going to be kind of ongoing, and we'll talk about this more in the future, but I'll mention it right now. So for this program, for this whole application web development program, we actually use a portfolio to that you should be adding your work every course to that. So you should be upgrading that throughout. Now, so you've created one based really on the book. What we've done prior, this is kind of a new book this semester, but prior to this semester, we usually did kind of the web portfolio. It wasn't really part of a book assignment. We just kind of did it later on in the course, and you created your web portfolio. But this book kind of led you through that. Now, you were going to be doing some other technologies here, such as Bootstrap and that. And so, maybe if you decide you want to redo your portfolio, that's fine. If you want to continue with that portfolio you have, that's fine as well. That's up to you. There's different options with that. And we'll talk more about that in the future. But just kind of want to point out, that you do need to have a designated web portfolio that you can update and continue to add new projects, things you've worked on, examples, and so forth. Because that's going to be kind of your personal marketing brand, right? That website's going to be how you're going to market yourself. Okay, it's going to be part of that process, so to speak. So did want to keep that and mention that. So as far as late assignments, when you ever turn in something late, please let me know what assignment you want regraded. I know that there is a lot of assignments, and pretty much like for every assignment you do, I've got 10 people in the course, so multiply that by 10, and so. If you do go ahead and change, regrade something, you need something regraded, say, hey, could you go ahead and go look at, chapter 9, apply, or, regrade this. It's hard for me just to kind of go regrade everything all the time, all right? It's kind of not realistic. So, please let me know what you want regraded. It'll be a big help there. And maybe even when you check it in, you could put a part of your check-in. You can always, when you put a comment, you can actually put, something in there as well. So that could be helpful. Let's see here. So let's see, what else do I want to discuss here? I think what we'll go ahead and do here is, so yeah, I do want to just do a quick course summary, kind of like, what we've learned, right? What have we learned in our book, using our exercises, etc. What have we learned? And then I'm going to do a Bootstrap lecture today as well. I do want to go ahead, why don't I just go ahead and go through a couple of the assignments for this week, just real quick. I'm going to go ahead and reference my email from earlier too. So just to make sure, there's not any confusion, we're skipping over chapter 11. You don't need to do any assignments or anything with chapter 11 at all. We're going to, for chapter 12, okay? So for chapter 12, we're not going to be doing U-turn or the lab 1 and 2, which is strike a chord and the wildlife rescue, right? So we're not going to be doing those. So this week we're going to kind of dive in. We're going to start with doing a little bit of Flexbox stuff. And the reason we're going to be kind of doing a little bit of Flexbox stuff is because Bootstrap it's based on a lot of what it does. It's actually based on Flexbox, and kind of what Bootstrap is, kind of sits on top of when I say it's kind of like under the hood, it's using all the CSS, but it's kind of what's kind of called like an interface. It's between you don't have to do the CSS specifically. You just change you have to understand how Bootstrap is doing things, and you use Bootstrap specific classes. But under the hood, it's actually using CSS, and I'll show you that here in a minute. I'll kind of explain that a little bit more here when I start the lecture for Bootstrap. But Bootstrap, a lot of how it positions things and everything is based on Flexbox. So it's really a good idea to kind of, I know the book introduced you to Flexbox, but we got a couple more assignments kind of to help you out a little bit more with that. Just to make sure that you have that foundation before you really start getting into Bootstrap. Okay, so I did come up with a suggested order for the week's assignment. You don't have to follow this, but I really strongly encourage you to. So the first one is this Flexbox Froggy game, and then the Flex Shop project. And then I just suggest you read the chapter 12, check out the lecture on Bootstrap. And then for the chapter 12 assignments, you'll still need to do the apply, the analyze, the extend, and the written test, right? And like I said, you're going to skip U-turn and lab 1 and 2, okay? And then after you do that, I will go ahead and, I'm going to also go through the Bootstrap assignments as well tomorrow. So you'll have that available. And then here's a couple other additional Bootstrap assignments we'll be doing, okay? One on business forms, and one is my favorite things. So I will go through all of that tomorrow, okay? But, I suggest you go ahead and start with it in this order. And I think I actually, on Inside Rankin, I changed kind of the times things were due. It's really irrelevant. Basically, your assignments are due by midnight on Sunday. I kind of changed the time just so one would follow when you bring up. It shows you the first one that's due, just so it would follow it. I kind of changed it a little bit so that this one would show first, then second, etc. Okay. Okay. So that's that. Let's go ahead and just take a quick look here. There's not a lot I'm going to review here, but did want to take a quick look here. So here's this Froggy game. It's Flexbox Froggy. You just go in here. You got 12 levels, and you don't have to sign in or anything. You just complete it. When you do get to the end, go ahead and, it'll tell you, you successfully completed it. Make a screenshot of that and put that in your directory, okay? Now, I did find this little video for Flexbox Froggy. So if you go to that, it's actually going to
Hi,
walk.
this is Josh from Over the.
It'll actually walk you through all 24 of them. So I'm kind of giving that to you just to make things a little bit easier. But try to learn as you go. Don't just put the answers there. Try to see if you can understand what it's doing. Kind of important. Okay. And I do have this quick guide here as well to look at. So this is how you do a row, direction of a row. Here's a reverse row. So all you do is by doing flex direction reverse row, it's going to go 3, 2, 1 instead of 3, 2, 1 like that, all right? And then here's flex direction column, and here's a reverse column, okay, etc. Okay, so try to go a little bit through these. Take a look at these, and always remember the main axis is from left to right. The cross axis up to down, from top to bottom. Okay. All right. So that was Flexbox Froggy. You will have to create a new folder. So just create a new folder and put here you're just putting a screenshot that you've completed it. The next one here is FlexShop. And so FlexShop was created, it's a code along created by Mr. Gudmanstead, who's another instructor in the AWD program. And so down here is the playlist of doing for that, for the FlexShop. You just follow along with that and do the coding. Also, I have download, here's the images you need for that. If you click on this and just come in here, up here, and just click download, and this will download a zip file. So you'll have to download that zip file and have to unzip those into your an images directory that you have, under your FlexShop directory that you create under your chapter 12. Okay. So under there, you'll create an images directory, right? And then, first you have to create the FlexShop folder. Under there, create images, drop your images in there, right? So pretty straightforward there on that. And then the other one here is the Chapter 12 Labs. And not to keep reiterating, but you don't have to worry about these assignments here this week. You just do the apply, extend, and analyze, right? Okay. Oh, I didn't really mean to get rid of something there. I don't know which one I got rid of. All right. I think I'm good. Okay, just wanted to kind of do a quick little course summary, summary over the book, stuff we've kind of accomplished here, just very quickly. So basically, you learned the HTML5 foundations here, using semantic tags such as, header, navigation, main, article, section, aside, footer, etc. Also learned other tags as well using, the correct layout, the HTML tag, the meta tags, the head tag, divs, paragraphs, etc. So you kind of should have a pretty good grasp on all of those by now. Also, always remember about the doc type declaration at the top. We also learned about some of the form enhancement tags like email and tel for telephone. There's also date and others as well. So CSS, learned some of the fundamentals of CSS and styling, such as selectors and specificity, where, depends on how you, where you create those CSS files. Obviously, if you do something in an external file, if you do it, and embed it. If you embed it right in your HTML at the top and the head in the style section at the top, that's going to take precedence over your external. And then obviously, if you had inline styles, that would take precedence as well. You learned about the box model, right? That everything really on a web page is a box, and you have and your box contains content, padding, border, and margin, right? Even though sometimes you'll see something that's a circle on a page, really that circle is just, we remember, use that border radius. Use that border radius. Basically, you're taking the square and turning it into a circle by doing that, right? So always remember everything's a box on a web page, right? It uses the box model. We learned about different display properties and positioning and doing like display none to get rid of, so it doesn't display at all. We have display block, display inline block, etc. Learned a little bit about topography and colors, etc. Learned about a little about mobile first approach, right? Designing, most of the web pages are accessed nowadays via mobile. More people are accessing, web pages from mobile than any other device, right? So a lot of companies started going to the mobile first type philosophy, where you build it for mobile first, and then you go ahead and make adjustments to your code for other screens, right? Looked at a little bit of the flexible layouts, such as the grid system, and obviously Flexbox as well. So let's see here. A couple other things. Remember that it's best most of the time, for the most part, it's kind of best practices to either use like percentages or relative units as opposed to pixels. You can do pixels, you can do points. I know there's a lot to choose from, kind of a little too much there, isn't it, sometimes? But, it's best to use like relative units, EMs relative to what's the default on that page. So if you do a 1.5 EM, what is the default of that page? If that default on that page is a 16-point font, then it's EM of 1.5 is going to be 16 plus half of it would be 8. 16 plus 8, 24, right? So it'd be 24. That's how that works, right? Let's see. We looked at media queries and breakpoints. Here it's mentioned again about Flexbox. We looked at animations and transitions. Talked about accessibility, and always remember, accessibility is very important, especially sometimes, if you're working for any government agency and you're developing there, that's very important. So remember, if you ever have an interview with any kind of government organization, always, that's one area you really want to review is your accessibility. There's different laws and so forth, and you need it's a good idea to kind of be familiar a little bit with that. There's certain specifications in that, because the government actually does really push for private companies as well to adhere to that. But if you do work for the government, you're definitely going to have to make sure you adhere to different specifications and laws as far as that's concerned. Obviously, for screen readers and everything else, so that if somebody can't see a page, the screen reader can be reading that and still still be able to effectively use that website, even if they can't visually see it. Sorry. Development tools and workflows. So we learned about using Visual Studio Code. We learned about using the different extensions, right? Learned about version control with Git and GitHub, how to set up a repository, how to add, commit, push, pull. And there's other ways to do it besides what we do. And What we did as far as from the GitHub desktop. GitHub desktop is probably about the simplest way to do it. But there's benefits in doing it other ways, and throughout this program, you'll learn some other ways to do it as well. One of them just doing it on the command line, right? Just doing command line things where you basically type it. Once you get that down, it can be very effective and very easy to use. And you have a lot more power and options with using command line type stuff. And you'll learn more about using the command line as we go forward. Okay, just kind of want to go through, a few things that kind of covered throughout the book and, help you realize that, we've really kind of made a lot of progress, right, in a very short amount of time. And so you really, like I've said before, you really should be very proud of yourself. So next thing I'm going to go ahead and do here is go ahead and start talking about Bootstrap. So Bootstrap is a fast and responsive library to build websites. Okay, you can quickly design and customize responsive mobile-first sites with Bootstrap, and Bootstrap's the most popular front-end open source toolkit. So front end, we know what front end means, right? Front end means everything runs within your browser, right? It's not you don't have you're not necessarily getting something from some back end service somewhere, right? From some server outside of where you're at. Bootstrap basically runs within your browser, right? We're pretty much front end. Open source, just to review, I know we've kind of touched on it, talked about it, your book mentioned it. Open source basically means it's available. It's available to use. There's not a license associated. You can actually take it and build something on top of it. You can actually change how they're doing things, customize it, everything else. Okay, and I'm talking about the code base and everything else. Usually there are some general rules with that, but it's open source as opposed to let's say Microsoft Windows. You can't just say out, you can't just take Microsoft Windows and build upon it and everything else. It's called proprietary. It's closed. It's not an open source, right? Whereas a lot of companies have decided, they build something and they make it open source. There's a lot of benefits for the company to do that. It helps because a lot of other people will join the community and they'll add to it, they'll make it better, they'll support it, provide maintenance and everything else. So there's a lot of benefits in helping it grow and continue. So that's kind of one of the biggest reasons for open source. So history of Bootstrap. So Bootstrap was created at Twitter in 2010. By I think his name's Otto. I can go look at real quick that history. Let me just. So Bootstrap was developed at Twitter by Mark Otto and Jacob Thornton. Began as a internal tool named Twitter Blueprint. In mid 2020 to ensure design consistency before being released to the public as open source front end framework. Bootstrap in August of 2011. So it's evolved, and it's become one of the most popular front end frameworks. Okay, it has a community. The project has continued to grow with community contributions, including more than 20 releases and ongoing updates. So okay. It's made it easier to build responsive websites. Yes. So the key benefits of Bootstrap: quick startup, and we're going to go take a look at that here in a little bit. You can actually just go and grab some little start kind of code for different kinds of components you want to use, and you can grab them, and then you can just modify them from there. It has the mobile first responsive design philosophy. And so as long as you do things right, it will take care of some things that we have already had to do ourselves kind of by hand, but Bootstrap kind of takes care of some of those things for you. And also Bootstrap has also what's called themes and templates. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at Bootstrap's website here. Okay, so if you just go to getbootstrap.com, this is the front page of Bootstrap, the main page. Okay, always remember, because there's different. What happens is you'll see all these different releases, and the reason for that is when a company builds some large application, right? They're going to do it with a certain release, with a certain Bootstrap release. Well, once they do that, every time Bootstrap changes, as long as the functionality is working, they're not going to kind of keep updating. It's not really cost effective for companies just to redo things over and over again. So, they'll go ahead and might use some previous release and continue with that. They might have to make some updates to something. Well, they don't redo everything, right? They'll just use the previous release to to continue forward. And so there's different documentation based on the different releases, right? So you don't want to be trying to use, if you let's say you're working at a company and they're using a 4.6 release, you don't want to be looking at the 5.3 documentation, right? You want to be looking at the older documentation, right? To, see what you want to, need to do, or, if you got questions or you're looking for things, you want to use the correct documentation, right? So that's what that's all about. So different ways to get Bootstrap. So we look at that. Now here, we're not using NPM as Node Package Manager. Eventually, you're going to learn this stuff. But that's not part of this course right now, okay? Other ways to do this is to download. You can download the file, you can download the code, you can download the CSS, the Bootstrap code, directly, okay? Or you can use what's called a CDN, right? And the CDN is a delivery network, okay? A CDN is a content delivery network, and you can use that to bring it right into your thing, and we'll do that here in a minute. Let's see here. So like I said, always remember you're on 5.3, right? So you want to do that, okay? And so here it's telling you here's the latest version. So usually there's minor versions, and these get changed, throughout. These get added on, throughout until there's like something. And the way they do the versioning, as long as if it's small little things changes, they add these minor versions, right? A major version is usually going to be like 5.4, right? 5.5, and so forth, right? But this is considered a very minor version, right? So they've had, since 5.3 was originally, they've had eight of different minor versions as well, okay? So currently we're at 5.3.8, okay? So here, let's just go ahead and click download. So this is one way to do it. And so what I'm going to do here, let me see, is this what I really want? Okay, well, I was right. I did download the right thing. It's just can be a little confusing. So it does download a bunch of stuff, okay? But the basic Bootstrap you can use is basically just this minimum version. So you can download this and you can just grab this, okay? And you can include this just like you've included other CSS, just like you include when you create your own styles.css that we've done a bunch of times. And you would just include this min thing here, And let's just go ahead and take a quick look at that. I'm going to have to probably unzip this though first. Okay. So if this is a little bit confusing, don't worry, because we're not actually going to do it this way. I'm just kind of going to show you this. So this is kind of like this min version. And this is basically, when you're talking about Bootstrap, this is the library. This is the min version where it's kind of all clumped together, right? It's a little harder to understand, but here's kind of the whole min version type thing, right? So this is basically the whole library, right, that you could use. So you could drop that in there and just use it. We're not going to use it that way. We're going to use the content delivery network, okay? So some benefits in using the files itself. So let's just say that you're concerned about bandwidth. So bandwidth is basically like slow internet connections. You're worried about slow internet connections, then having the file there, then you can already have it, and instead of having a link to it using the CDN, then it would have to go get it and bring it in. So sometimes there's benefits in just having the source code there, okay? But a lot of people use the CDN. There's different reasons for using one or the other, but for the most part, it's best just to kind of the easiest way. And what we're going to kind of do is just use the CDN. So let me show you how we're going to do that. So in here, there's a bunch of quick starts, okay? And this is an introduction. So under, basically getting started, introduction, there's a bunch of get starts here. And the one that we're going to kind of use here is going to be the second one a lot, okay? We're going to use the second one. What was this first one saying? Okay. So here, as you can notice, it's got a link. Okay, so here's the CSS, but also some of the functionality that Bootstrap has also uses JavaScript. Okay, we're not going to have to worry about it right now, about the JavaScript really portion of it, but there is going to be some things we're going to use that's going to actually be using it. We'll have to know in depth what that really means too much, but just the fact that it's going to be important to have that available. Okay, so here basically you just come in to the second quick start and just copy that to your clipboard. Okay, and I'm going to come in here, and I created this index.html. Let me just get rid of this, and then you can just go ahead and paste that in there. So here you've got a page, and this page has a link. Okay, this page has a link to the CSS, the Bootstrap min file. Okay, and actually, just for fun here, that's where I probably should have shown you rather than downloading it. But just know that you can download it. If I just do this, it'll bring it all into the browser. So this is that min version. This is the whole thing. Okay, this is that whole min version. Okay. So basically what this is doing is it's going to grab this, right? It's not going to bring it into your file system, right? It's just bringing it into the browser's memory, right? So right now we're in Visual Studio Code. This is just a link file. This hasn't really gotten anything yet. Okay. This is just a link in a file, right? The only time this gets something is when it goes into the browser, right? When it goes into when you open up the browser, it's going to go to this and it's going to load that. Okay. It's going to load that within the browser's memory. so we have that. We include that in our head section, okay? And then here in our right before the end body tag, we have our JavaScript, okay? And all you have to do is include that as well. You know, you just do what I just did. You just copied it right from there. Leave that. Don't mess with that. Always leave that right before your end body tag, no matter what you're doing. When you're doing these Bootstrap assignments, you just do everything within here, right? And leave that just like it is, okay? Leave that just like it is, always at the end there, and do all your other work within the body section here, okay? Obviously, you might have some other styles that you might also have some links to some CSS styles or whatever, but generally always have the script tag right before the end body tag, just like it is here, okay? Another thing I wanted to point it out is this integrity tag here. This integrity, it's not a tag, integrity attribute. And what this integrity attribute does, it actually provides some security. It actually provides some security so that it helps prevent, I guess, your web application from being compromised by a malicious actor. And what it does is when you grab this, right, if somehow, you know, I know this may be a little complex, but over a network, sometimes something can be grabbed over the network, manipulate it, and so when it comes to you, it's different than what you would think it was supposed to be. Well, what it was on the original server, right? That's how sometimes things get manipulated like that, right? Cause it, you know, malicious activity. So what this does is by using these integrity tags, okay, this integrity tag is what's called a hash, okay, and you don't have to worry about a lot of this. It's basically a cryptographic hash. Notice the word crypto, right? So crypto is based on cryptography. This is based on, you know, kind of the same idea of cryptocurrencies, right? Because all cryptocurrencies under the hood are using cryptographic algorithms, okay? And you don't have to worry about this. I'm just kind of explaining a little bit what this is. And I'm going to show you the importance, why this is important here in a second. But so you've got this, and this is going to kind of, by adding this, you know, you're kind of preventing yourself from potentially not getting what you expect to be getting from it, okay? And let me show you something here. So here, I'm just going to open up, this could be Hello World. I'm going to open up Live Server here. And so we see Hello World here, okay? And if I hit F12, let's see, everything looks good. Failed to load the resource. Okay, well, that's a different thing. That's just telling you because there's no favicon thing. This is kind of a thing they show a lot nowadays, but no big deal on that, okay? Now, but what if I change this? Let me get rid of, now you really don't want to do this, right? But I'm just showing you, making a point here, okay? What this happens if you change that. I'm going to save that. I'm going to pull that back up here again. Now look what this said. Failed to find a valid digest in the integrity attribute, right? So this resource has been blocked, right? So it will actually prevent anything that's in that file to do anything. It will block, it actually blocks that file from even coming into the browser because the integrity attribute doesn't match what's expected, so it will block it. You know, it's a kind of a security function there, okay? So kind of interesting there, huh? But here, let's put it back like it was, and we should hit save, and it should be fine now. I think I closed the other. Open in Live Server, and let's do the F12. Look at the console. I guess I didn't do it right. Let's see. Okay, that should be good. That now. Let's take another look. And all's good now, right? Okay. So just kind of want to tell you, you know, explain a little bit what that is. And there's an important reason for that, and so you understand that. So, um, and especially, if you are trying to do some Bootstrap stuff, and all of a sudden something does not showing right? Well, why ain't my Bootstrap stuff working in here? Go ahead and look at that console. Hit that developer tools, look at that console. See if you see what we just looked at. Okay, if that, then something's mismatched, right? Um, Something I do want to point out is make sure you're always using this version. Okay, if you, especially we start getting some of these Bootstrap exercises, I know students like to search for work that's already kind of been done here and there. And if you do that, it may be using a different version of that. So you need to make sure that you are using the correct version. And I do have in assignments that you must use this version. Okay. All right. Let's get back to here. So we're doing all right, I'm not going to go through all of this. There's also this free themes for Bootstrap as well. So let's just kind of look at that real quick. There's different companies that offer different things. Some things are free, some things are paid for. So there's also different themes you can use and download. Because Bootstrap and you'll see that Bootstrap has a default set of kind of a default theme. And if you're wanting to do something beyond that, and you don't necessarily for this course, but when you start really getting into some serious development, you're probably going to want to do some different kinds of themes. So this is just showing you that that is available, okay, where you can use different kinds of themes, okay. Okay, this is just a reboot. So for improved cross-browser rendering, we use a reboot to correct inconsistency across browsers. Remember, like we used the normalized stuff, kind of builds upon that normalized stuff, providing many HTML elements with somewhat opinionated styles using only element selectors. So installation. So we've already done the CDN, and that's what we'll be using in this course. So that's really all you need to really worry about. Breakpoints. So Bootstrap has some built-in breakpoints. And so let's grab something here. Let's grab something else here. Let's grab a navigation. Let's grab navigation. Let's grab a nav bar. So there's these predefined little examples that you can grab. So let's just go ahead and grab one of these. And it will work. So once you have your, as long as you for it to work though, for any of those things like what I just grabbed to work, you have to have your CSS there. You have to have your job, and some things require the JavaScript as well. Drop-down menus do use that JavaScript, and I think that nav I grabbed does have that. But I'm just going to drop that in there. I just pasted that in there. I'm going to save. Let's go take another look at this. And so here's a drop-down menu. See how quick and easy some of this is to do, and to do this by hand take a long time, especially years ago. That's what we had to do all this stuff by hand. And as time's gone on, there's a lot more frameworks and libraries and open source projects available to make things a lot easier. This is just a basic nav bar, right? Even has a search button and that. It has the button, all of that just from dropping that in there, right? Now another thing kind of want to look at, like I was talking about breakpoints. So you notice that all of a sudden, if it gets to a certain point, right? If it gets to a certain point, there's the desktop version, and now it's all of a sudden, boom, right? So it has built-in breakpoints automatically within Bootstrap, which can be customized in that, but this is the basic Bootstrap breakpoints, right? So okay. Um, so that also has extra. So you'll have to learn these. How wide is your viewport port? And what we're going to get into this a lot more tomorrow. Um, extra small, small, medium, large, extra extra large. So here's your width, right? We've done some of these before. This one's greater, all the way up until 576. So if it's greater than or equal to 576, it's going to, this small will be that size. So you'll be using these instead of using these. Okay. So you'll just have to kind of know that one is going to be that. And, you don't have to memorize them, but you have to at least be able to look them up. So you say, oh yeah, what do I want to do for small or medium? For this size, this can be small, this can be medium, large, etc. Right? Um, and if we looked at our code, I wanted to see if I found something in here to explain that a little more, but don't think I'm going to find that here. Okay, more about that later. Okay, there's also spacing. So instead of, when we did margins, remember you do margins, you had to use, you did a margin of 1, 2, 3 as far as pixels or EMs or whatever. Well, now they have margin classes. Let's go ahead and go take a look at that. So M is for margin, P is for padding. Okay. And then if you have an M with a T, M with a T next to it, it's going to be margin top. So instead of having to do margin top or padding top, right? You just use MT or PT, right? For bottom, instead of doing margin bottom or padding bottom, you're going to do MB or PB. Now, also there's the idea of start and end, and I know that they kind of started doing that a little bit with the Flexbox, with the Flexbox stuff. They've kind of made changes to that because not in all languages, in all cultures, left and right isn't necessarily the same, right? So instead of doing left and right, they started doing start and end, right? Because start might be, like Chinese, you're going from left to right. It's kind of backwards from what you think. So they have what's called start and end. Starts, from our perspective, starts generally going to be from your left or top, right? And then, your end's going to be, either to your right, right? So we'll look at that more. So if you want to, let's say you want to set a left and right margin, right? You do MX, right? Would set both of the left and right margins, and the top and bottom would be whatever they are at that point, right? Either 0 or if they were set somewhere else. But if you wanted to just set the left and right margins of something, you can use MX for margin or PX for padding, right? And that would do left or right. If you want to do both top and bottom, you would do MY or PY. Okay. Yes, if you just use M by itself is going to be all four sides. P by itself is going to be all four sides. Right? I'll get into the spacer stuff later, but basically here's the different sizes. 0, obviously is nothing at all. Then you have 1. It adds what's called a spacer. I don't want to spend a lot of time getting into that right now. I don't want to confuse things, but here's your different sizes. You could do M1. M1 is going to give you um, a margin all the way around, right? If you want to do M top margin of 1, MT1, or MB1 will be bottom, right? So you just will have to spend some time learning what you need to put together for top, bottom, left, right, or if you want to do everything all together, all of them, you want a margin around everything, top, bottom, left, right, you just use M1, M2, M3, right? And then we've seen auto, we've used auto before, right? So you also can do auto as well. So MT, this is margin top 0, is basically the same as margin top, okay, margin top 0. Margin 1, okay, is basically this whole spacer concept. We'll talk about that later. But here's that margin S, right? Margin left. PX 2 is going to be padding left and padding right. Padding dash 3 is just going to be padding all the way around, right? So, okay. We will get into this a lot more. So, what side do you want it on? Here you go. So, M3 is going to be on all sides. MT, margin top, margin bottom, margin S, right, for left margin, margin start, right? ME for margin end, right? Start and end. X is for left or right. Y is for top or bottom. So this is just an example showing you. So when you're using this class, right, up until this point, we were always used to having, to code that class. Well, this class already exists, right? This class already exists within that Bootstrap library, within that file that gets downloaded, right? So how wide is your viewport? This is what we're kind of already looking at. So here you can see we're doing large screen, medium, large, 3. We'll get into this more tomorrow. I don't want to get too far into this. But basically, LG here, you can see that being large, right? There's your large. Here you've got XL for extra large, right? So basically, you're saying for your large screen, you want it to be size 3, right? For your extra large, you're saying 5 here, and we're gonna get more into that here tomorrow, I promise. Sizing relative to the parent. So you can also use the following classes to set the width property. You can have a width of 2.5 is 25%. A width of 50, W50 is 50%, 75%, 100%, right? Then you also have this idea of max width. And so here's max width and max height. So basically it's just telling you, you use this instead of this, right? You use this instead of this. So Bootstrap kind of has this predefined colors, um, and it sets things up in a certain way. Kind of look at a little bit like like we had headings, the H1 tags, H2 tags, right? Or H, but you always have an H1 tag and under that an H2. But really here, it's kind of like what's your primary color, and this color is considered a primary color. This is considered a secondary color. Um, this is considered a success. This is considered danger. This is considered warning. This is considered info. Okay, and it also has what's called text light. Um, Here's text dark, text muted, and text white, which looks a lot more. I guess light is a little lighter. So maybe I'll make this a little bigger if I can. So for a color, for a background color, use just BG dash primary, and that's going to be your primary color. Here's your secondary color. Instead of putting using the RBG stuff or that, you can just do for background color. You can just do BG primary or secondary or success or danger or warning or info, right? And that's good for different reasons. So let's say you're looking at you have different things on your page where you've got um, things that you just want to be info, right? Well, right, it's just background information. Well, it's always nice to have something named info instead of it just being some certain color, right? This kind of describes that. Oh, well, by you seeing, okay, this is some little info that I want to show, right? Then um, you can look at the HTML and look at that CSS. Well, the class on there. If you see info, then oh yeah, that's info. Or this is a primary. This is a secondary. This is something I'm showing when there's success, right? It might be something you hid, right? Block none, right? You know how we did block none. If it succeeds, then we do block display, maybe, right? Same with danger. Maybe that danger is actually still on that page, but you got that set to block none. And then if there's an error, then you go ahead and change that display to to show. And then, but if you've described that on your page as danger, then oh yeah, okay, you can it kind of helps you think about what you're doing on your page, so to speak. And so we're kind of got the same thing with borders, right? So here's a border primary, secondary, success, all the way through, just like the others. Okay, just like the others. Text formatting. Let's see here. I need to make this a little smaller. Maybe I can make it a little bigger here and still keep most of this. So this first one is text start. So this, instead of doing text align left, text align center, this is how you would do it. Okay. So this first one there is left align text, then centered. And then, and remember, we don't they've kind of started moving away from the left and right. So you start for left and for right. Okay. And then they also have text lowercase, text uppercase, text capitalized, and this is under the hood. It's what it's using. So that's what it's always doing. And when I keep on saying, you know, I said this before, under the hood means it's basically using it from that CSS, you know, that CSS file, right? The Bootstrap CSS file. That's what it's using. It's this here points to, you know, we'll call this, and then inside of the code within that CSS, the Bootstrap CSS, that's what it's actually doing, right? So in this case, this is a lowercase, changing it to lowercase. So if you had camel case text, it would transform that to lowercase. In this case, it's changing to uppercase. Text capitalized. This is going to be around some certain things there. I don't know what it did on that one, but okay. Font weight. Okay. So instead of having to do font weight bold or lighter, italic, normal. So this is how you do it, right? These are all just classes you use. Class equals forward bold, bolder, normal, etc. So this is why you know, we're kind of wanting to do a little bit more regular CSS Flexbox stuff, because Bootstrap uses, you know, Flexbox, and even the Bootstrap grid stuff is still is actually built with Flexbox instead of CSS Grid. So we learned about, you know, in our book we learned about Flexbox, CSS Flexbox, and CSS Grid, right? Well, Bootstrap also has Flexbox and Grid, but both Flexbox and Grid, the grid is still based on Flexbox, really. So Bootstrap doesn't use CSS Grid. It uses, even their grid system is based on Flexbox. Okay, just something to keep in mind. More background information than anything, but it is different, right? It is different. So for Flexbox, display none is going to be D none. D inline, you're basically just using D for everything, right? For your display there. Display flex, right? For Flexbox, you're going to have to display flex. You just do D-flex. Use breakpoints choice to display property depending on the width. Yeah. So basically, what you're kind of saying here is, for, you know, you're displaying for large screens, right? You're displaying whatever class this is. You're displaying it as block. Okay. By default, you're displaying it by none. But if you've got a large screen, so then when you're changing your screen sizes, that's where these things come into effect, right? So by default, it's going to be none. But if you're at a large screen size, whatever class that this would be on, right? Whatever class, whatever element, I should say, whatever. So if this is a div tag and you have that class, this class on here like this, right? If it says D none, by default, it's not even going to be visible, right? That's basically display none. But here, if it's a large, you had it real small and then you made it larger, once you reach that larger screen, it's going to display it as block, right? Here it's showing, this is an example here where you're saying by default, I want this displayed as block, right? But if it's a medium-sized screen, we want this to be we want this to be flex, right? We want this to be flex if it's a medium-sized screen. So this is how you do, instead of doing flex direction for row, flex direction, row reverse. This is basically how you do it for Bootstrap. Row, row reverse, flex column reverse. Okay, here. Yep. So you're just showing here by default. You display flex, right? Flex column. So you're saying by default you want to display flex and you want it to be flex column, right? So it's doing both of them, right? You got a space in between. So it's calling this class. It's, I shouldn't say calling this class. It's implementing, it's using that class there. And then it's using this class here, right? Then if saying, well, if it's large, let's make it a row. Okay? Let's make it a row instead of a column. And here's how you justify content, start, end, center, between, around, evenly, etc. Flex box align items, start, end, center, stretch, baseline. We'll look at more of these later. Align self. Yeah, we're going to have to look at some of this, a lot of this. Also, there's this order where you can actually change the order of how the item is. You need to be careful doing that, though, especially like with screen readers. That assistive kind of technologies that's assisting the user. Maybe like screen readers, what I'm talking about there. So you change the orders of things. Sometimes that can kind of mess up some of that. You got to be careful with using that. You can actually change the order of something on the screen. Okay, so we'll look at that a little bit. There's some reasons that it could be beneficial. There's some reason to be beneficial, especially like if you've got a mobile site. You may want to have a different order than if you got a desktop site, right? So you also have things for wrapping. We'll look into all that a little bit more tomorrow, I think. So that's all I have for today. Please let me know if you have any questions. Tomorrow I'll go a lot more in depth in some of these areas, and we'll go through the Bootstrap assignments as well. Thank you very much.